So here she is. Here is my lovely friend, Ruth Driscoll. How the very devil are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. I think definitely the sunshine helps a lot, doesn't it?
Yes, it did. We had a conversation a couple of days ago, didn't we, about how fortunate we are that we're able to get out into the sunshine during lockdown.
Absolutely. Yes, yes, most
So,
definitely.
Ruth, we're here to talk about something really important and quite serious that is going on in the world at the moment, and that is the rise in domestic abuse. So, we know that most domestic abuse incidents occur in the home, about 88% of them happen within the home. And we know that domestic abuse accounts for 15% of all violent crime, and that 9 out of 10 deaths are at the hands of a former or current partner. So we know that those are the statistics, and scarily, very sadly, 2 women, and we know that this happens to men and women, but we know that 2 women die a week at the hands of some form of from a partner or some form of domestic abuse ordinarily, but that has more than risen in the last 4 weeks of corona lockdown. And so, this is a very serious subject at the moment, and one that I'm desperate to talk to you about, because you have some real practical things that you can help these people with that are living in lockdown at the moment with an abusive partner. Is that right?
Well, yes. To be honest with you, Jill, this was such an inevitability that there was going to be a rise in this situation when lockdown occurred. And it makes me feel quite sad that, it's only when it becomes an issue that governments and those in authority actually start looking at it and looking at where there might be solutions. So, as often happens in these cases, we look to, well, what can we do around this kind of a situation? Firstly, for someone who's in that situation, what's something that they could potentially do? And I have some thoughts to offer you today. And also for those who suspect that somebody that they know or somebody that lives close to them may be in this situation. So we can talk a little bit there about some of the things that you might be able to look out for.
Yes, which is a really good idea. And I will share the campaign that I launched just a few days ago called SpotTheSigns, because with the renewed kind of community spirit, and one of the very positive things that have come out of lockdown is that more and more people are kind of looking out for each other within our communities. But what is also clear to me is that we've been too much minding our own business for many years, and that actually sometimes it's appropriate to just be a little bit more mindful and a bit more supportive and a bit more aware that there will be people that that have been suffering already and that are now suffering more from domestic abuse incidents. And I don't just mean violence, we're going to talk about the type of abuse too.
Yeah.
And so, taking on board that it's not somebody else's problem, that actually this is a societal problem and it's all of our problems in whatever form it takes.
Yeah, and in fact, Jill, the fact that we are all in lockdown, and as you rightly say, we're all much more alert and conscious and caring about the people around us. And that, in a sense, almost will support us in being more aware of where there might be a problem of domestic abuse and potentially even domestic violence with somebody who's close to us, living close to us, because we're all there, we're all in our homes all the time now, whereas normally we might miss something because we're out at work or we're down the shops or we're visiting family, but now we're all within our homes and we're more aware of the sounds of people living around us, sounds we can hear through walls, all of those things. And so that will help us to be far more alert where there may be a sinister problem close to us.
So we will get on to some of the other signs as well in the second half of the call. But
Yeah.
first of all, what I'd like you to do, because it seems strange that here you are, this very beautiful, very middle class, lovely Welsh lady, who actually you were a former headmistress, weren't you?
Yes, we say head teacher.
Oh, head teacher. Sorry, that shows my age, doesn't it?
Different connotations, I guess, for the headmistress.
But
not
actually,
that kind of a podcast.
no, not that kind of a podcast. Not this time, anyway. So here we are, and people might look at you or listen to you and think, well, what does she know? You know, how could she possibly? And what I've learned is that actually I've got, you know, acquaintances and friends from all different backgrounds, all different colours and creeds, all different income levels, and anybody and everybody, men and women, and you know, we're not going to talk about children specifically today, can be the victims of domestic abuse. So I just wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing with us a little bit about your own story, how it started, and what your experience of it was.
Yes, I guess this is one of the sort of myth busters around the world of domestic abuse, because you know, if you're not involved in it, then it's kind of difficult to understand and understand the complexities of it, because it's not a black or white issue in that sense. You know, even when you're inside an abusive relationship, there are times when it's actually quite good, you know, so it's a very complex area and difficult to understand when unless you've really been inside it and experienced it as well. And as you say, you know, at the time that this was happening to me, I was the head teacher of a challenging inner city primary school in an area of lowest 5% of socioeconomic deprivation. So it was a challenging environment. And indeed, it was an environment where I was dealing with bullying behavior and supporting the pupils, children, our learners, to make more effective choices. And also working with a community. You know, this was a challenging and needy community, and supporting there as well. So it's not like, you know, I was somebody that was downtrodden. I wasn't somebody who was afraid to use their voice and speak out. You know, I was a respected leader in a very demanding and challenging role, a very rewarding role as well, I have to say. So, you know, in different areas of our lives, we can have different experiences. But it's important to also, if you're in that situation, the one thing that happens is that you tend not to speak about it. You feel very ashamed, you know, that this has happened to you. And so a lot of what will happen will be that you may be covering it up, you may be justifying it, you'll be making excuses to yourself, as well as perhaps to anyone who might notice something and actually ask a question. So you'll be in denial about it. But always in the back of your mind, there'll be that niggling feeling, something's wrong here. And that can seem even more confusing if the relationship that you're in is abusive, but it's not actually physically abusive. But even when there's a physically abusive relationship, you know, the person who is inside that relationship can still not perhaps recognize what the real problem is. So it is a very complex situation. And it's one that we should really have our minds open to the whole time, that it's not particular people who are in that scenario. As you rightly said, it can happen right across the board. It happens to men, it happens to women, it can happen in gay relationships. It's a real issue that there's a whole raft of complexities around. So when I eventually released myself from this abusive relationship, you see, what had happened was my health suffered as a result of this. And a consequence of that was that I needed to resign from my position as head teacher. And that kind of sent me on a different journey, of not only recovering my health, but also discovering what was it that had gone on. Because I kind of had 3 burning questions that I needed to find the answer to. Why was it that I was receptive to the negative messages that this person had been placing on me? What was it about him that had made him so randomly and pointlessly cruel? And how could I ensure that it would never happen to me again?
And I think that's really important, because we do know that women who come out of abusive relationships tend to go back into similar type of, or men for that matter,
Yes.
go back into similar experiences. And that's when you've never been in that situation, it's sometimes hard to fathom, why don't they just leave, why are they putting up with it, it's really hard to understand, isn't it?
It's very hard to understand, and it can cause a great deal of frustration, not only for those who, have somebody in that situation who has an acquaintance or a friend or a relative, but even for example, the Crown Prosecution Services, where they've managed to get as far as taking the abuser to court, and then the other partner, often the woman, will say, no, I don't want to go through with it, I love him. It's very difficult for people to understand the complexities that are involved here. But it's so important that you know where the gaps are in you.
Yes.
I'd
really like to have another show. I think we'll do another conversation about that, and helping people to really understand what the cycle of abuse looks like.
Definitely.
But today, I think really more importantly, the key message for today is what we can offer people today. There's just one question that I'd like to ask you though, which is, did anybody ask you at any time? Did anybody see any red flags or have any idea that you were going through this?
I think they didn't like him, and they did feel that they were excluded from the relationship that I was having with him, which is one of those red flags.
Yeah.
That sort of isolating, pushing away anyone else who is close to you. No one actually asked me directly, but I'm sure they had they had a lot of concerns and worries, and felt that I had been lost to them. And indeed, I would say at the worst time during the relationship, I actually didn't have a clue who I was anymore.
We will talk about that. So, but first of all, what I'd really like to do is, it's very difficult for anybody who's at home at the moment to access practical help.
Yes.
And we know that the helplines are, the calls have gone up by 120, 146%, it's been quoted. And that sometimes it's very difficult for women or men to even make that phone call, because they are so controlled, super controlled now. Every moment is controlled. And we know there's a great service, we know that there's the silent service, which women can call 999. And if they can't speak, or men, if they're too afraid to speak, they call 999 and then just dial 55, and the police will be alerted and will come to where they are. But that only has to be from a landline. That can't work from a mobile, because obviously your mobile isn't traced in the same way, so that's better from a landline. A lot of people don't have landlines, so it's quite complicated, isn't it?
It
but
is.
What I'd really like to talk to you about, with your experience, and I know that you've gone on to, as you say, this self-discovery, and I'd really like to talk to you about that maybe next time we get together as well, and how your life has changed and what you've discovered about yourself and your ex-partner, and how all of that kind of came about. But for those that are listening now, and thank you if you've kept listening till this far, is what can people do who are at home today and they are in this very fearful, because abuse is based around fear, is it not?
Yes.
What can they do? There's some practical things I know that you have to offer, some suggestions to help them survive through this very difficult time.
Yes. What I do now is I actually work with people, supporting them out of manipulative, abusive, controlling relationships and into empowerment and freedom. So there are, this is the great news. There are a lot of things that you can do to support yourself, because it's finding again that power inside yourself. Because, ultimately, it's a difficult concept to understand when you're inside the relationship, but it's recognizing that, the reason that this has happened is because inexplicably and, and unconsciously, you have gradually allowed that person to get away with those things. This is where, your boundaries are not kind of firmly enough in place, which is what I recognized about why this had happened to me. But crucially now, you're at home, you're stuck inside in lockdown with this person of whom you feel probably very frightened. You feel like you're treading on eggshells the entire time. You just don't know what's going to provoke that person to kick off, and then there will be a great outburst, which may involve a verbal assault on you, may involve a physical attack on you. Obviously, if there is a physical attack, then it's really important that whatever means you can use to get a message to the police, because they need to handle that from there. But from inside the home, things that you can do. So the one thing that's really important, because the abuser gets inside your head, and the reason that they're able to control you is because they are putting you constantly in this place of fear. So what's something that you can do without them realizing what it is that you are doing that can help to pop the bubble of that power that they're holding over you, and make you feel, actually, there is a possibility that I can control things again here. So one of the things, just a little technique. So one of the things that I used with my abusive partner was I gave him a name. The name that I gave him was the Jackass. Now, that kind of, it sounds a little bit like I'm being disrespectful. This is not about being disrespectful. This is about taking a strategic approach to help you feel less intimidated by that person. You often heard, if you're nervous standing in front of a group of people, just imagine them all naked. It's kind of like that sort of a technique. But the idea is you give them a name and create an image. So for me, the image of the Jackass was, the head of the pantomime horse. So it's like he's put the head of the pantomime horse on. He thinks he's a fine strutting stallion, but he's actually, he looks more like a pantomime horse. And I imagine this pantomime horse, great teeth, and little coloured spots all over him. And I called him the Jackass. Now, the reason that works is that when that person is coming at you, rather than seeing the person that's in front of you, you put the image of what you've created. And the sillier you can make it, the better. Sometimes laughter can help you. If you can put something, just makes you go, give a little bit of a laugh. Not you laugh in front of them. You just keep that inside your head, so that when that person is coming at you with anger, rather than feeling that you're recoiling in the way that might normally happen, it's easier for you to stand your ground, not in any confrontational way, but in a way that stops that power over you. Mm-hmm. So it's something that may take a little bit of practice, but
it reminds me of, and you'll get this because being a head teacher, of the boggart in Harry Potter. Where they come out of the boggart comes out, and it's Professor Snape, and he turns into Granny or Auntie, whatever her name is. It's that very powerful, vivid image, isn't it?
Brilliant. Yes, that's exactly it, Jill. Yes, the more powerful and vivid you can make that image, and the crazier that you can make it in terms of your mind's eye, then the more it will help you to feel less intimidated by that person. Now, this is important because the critical thing is that a bully needs you to be frightened and intimidated by them.
Yes.
Because, if you're not frightened or intimidated, where does the bullying go? So the more that you're able to feel less intimidated by that person, the less power that they have. But here's the key thing: they will have no clue what you're doing.
No.
They'll just know that their power's gone.
Isn't that interesting? So it's actually a change of your internal state,
Yeah.
which is not obvious externally.
Yes. That's exactly right, Jill. Exactly right. Because it's what's going on inside your head that counts. That's where they're winning the battle at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's where you need to start taking back the control over what's happening.
And presumably this works at all stages, because we do know that abuse escalates, and that actually, I think what we're going to do at some point is talk about that lockdown is an ultimate escalator of the abuse kind of cycle, just like having a baby or moving house or losing your job is, or whatever. But actually using those techniques when potentially things are not quite as you see it on the TV, for example. If your only experience of domestic abuse is seeing somebody beaten up on a Coronation Street or whatever, you might think that that's what people are experiencing, but it doesn't have to be as bad as that, does it? It can be much more subtle, a push, or just verbally or sexually. Just taking away your self-esteem, your freedom.
Yes.
All of that counts, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it's almost like a sort of a sliding scale in terms of the level of abuse and the way in which it shows up. You could have somebody who is, sort of punishes you with their silence. Yeah. And that can also completely mess with what's going on in your mind.
Yes, and
feel like you're going crazy.
That I'm sorry to interrupt you. That's one of the reasons that I'm interested in this, is because it's only really since I've started doing a little bit of work around domestic abuse that I realised that was what my father did to my mother. Is that withdrawing his verbal communication with her, sometimes for days or weeks on end,
yes,
was coercive control, effectively. And actually, as a small child, I was the one in the middle that was expected to communicate between the two of them.
Yes.
So it doesn't have to be that obvious, and it's taken me over 50 years to work out that was what was going on.
Well, and yeah, this is, why I'm saying it's far more complicated from the inside. And often those things go right back, to childhood. And it's through what happened in your childhood that maybe your boundaries around yourself were not firmly enough in place. Your lack of self-esteem that allows that person to, be able to get in and then get inside your head and start that control of your life. So there are such a range of ways in which. That's why I always say manipulation, abuse, and control. I don't just say abuse, because I want to make sure that people realize it happens at all sorts of levels, and there are things you can do about it. You don't have to accept it. It's not like this is the way it's always been. You can change it. And there are techniques to do that.
I've been talking to a social worker friend of mine who works with domestic abuse victims, who was a domestic abuse victim herself for over 20 years. And I was talking to somebody yesterday who was worked for the World Bank. This is all things. But anyway, is there anything else? So we've got this very powerful image. Is there any other technique or anything else that you can suggest for people at the moment?
Well, I've created a little gift that I know you're going to put the link for, and that is again an exercise that you can do that will help you to maintain control of your emotional state, because the key thing here is that the more calm you can be, the more you are able to think clearly, and the less you will be reacting to what is happening. And therefore, you're in a stronger position to be able to make choices about what you do and how you are responding to the way in which this person is behaving towards you. So keeping calm is a really important part of this.
Yeah.
You see, Jill, you talked earlier about how fear plays such a huge part here. And the problem is that when you are overtaken by these strong and overwhelming emotions, it does kind of cut across your ability to be able to think straight, to be able to think clearly. And it could well be that, especially perhaps if you're, you feel you are in physical danger, you need to be able to think calmly, even though you're in a situation of danger. So there is that little exercise which that you can access through the download, but for the purposes of what we're doing here in this podcast, then the important thing to understand is that your emotions are controlled through your breathing. And then if you can put your breathing into a state of calmness, then that will help to control what's going on inside your head, inside your thought processes.
So does the MP3 that you're going to do, does that include breathing? That's a lead kind of anxiety reduction?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little, it's a strategy, a technique that you can use constantly through the day that involves not just breathing also, but
you can have it on your phone.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's for using all the time, and recognizing when the chatter is going on inside your head that's stopping you from thinking clearly, that fear is putting there, just to release it, just to release that, so that you're in a position to be able to think more calmly.
Yes.
And then put that little whatever silly name and face you put in place.
Yeah. So the combination of the two, because adrenaline and cortisol, those fear hormones, your hormones are the things that run the show.
Yes.
We always think it's our brain or whatever, it's our thinking that runs the show. It's not. Our hormones are definitely in control.
Yes.
And the most powerful ones are the flight and fright hormones, which are the adrenaline and cortisol. And you'll know this, anybody can relate to this. If you've been put in a dangerous situation, whether that's, a dog coming up and barking at you, or, a vehicle that's running headlong into you, or whatever the situation is, all you can think about is running away. That's because your brain is just telling you, just get out. Because I
did a TEDx talk around this subject.
Yes,
don't let fear interfere.
Yes, and we'll post that link actually as well, because I think people need to see that TEDx talk too.
Well, it puts a different connotation on fear and the job of fear. So yes, if anyone would like to listen to that,
it's a really good watch. Actually, I have watched it. So we've got a couple of really tangible techniques here for anybody that is in lockdown and they are at home, just to perhaps reframe this a little bit, because I know that one of the big dangers of suffering with abuse or violence is that you kind of stop having a voice, but at least this way you can have a voice in your own head which is a positive voice. That's
where winning this battle starts. Is getting back in charge of what's going on inside here, and feeling the strength of that, and recognizing that you're not helpless. You're not in a victim place, even if you might feel like it, but you're only in the victim space if your head is telling you that. So we've got to remove that feeling that you're a victim here, but you are somebody who can take practical steps to get back inside and get control of what's happening inside your head, which is what the abusive person is removing from you.
And so the other thing that I'd really like to just cover on again, where we touched on it a couple of times as well, is that we almost certainly in our lives at some stage or another will have friends, relatives, co-workers, associates who are victims of some form of abuse. I certainly know that that's the case for me. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do this show was because there's somebody in our family that is suffering at the moment, and a relative of both of us just kind of said to me, I can't believe that's happening. I can't, how can that happen to somebody like her? How does that kind of thing happen? And I had no idea. And he's been watching her profile on Facebook, but reading between the lines, I was kind of thinking there's something really quite not right here. And it was confirmed, fairly recently when I was talking to her own father about it. So my guess is that there will be an awful lot of people like that who just would never think that this was on their radar to look out for.
Yes, yeah,
So,
and that person themselves, they won't be believing that this, could have happened to them.
yes.
Yeah.
So can we just talk then a little bit from the angle of how does this start? What are the signs? Whether you want to talk about it from the victim perspective or from somebody outside looking in, or maybe it's the same thing, I don't know. But how can we spot the signs? How can we be part of this community now that's going to draw a line under this and really get down into stopping the abuse?
Well, I want to start by saying, what a brilliant job you are doing here with this campaign of Spot the Signs, because it's certainly something that every one of us within the community need to be aware of these signs. And of course, a lot of the things that we might normally notice it's now much more difficult to spot those signs, isn't it? Because we're not actually seeing somebody. So I wanted to talk about two things really that we can do to really keep our awareness and as high as possible. The first thing is, of course, just listening. Where we are home far more now, and we will be hearing noise from the homes around us. And, we will hear sometimes shrieks and cries and, people having a little bit of a rant, losing their temper. And some of those will be perfectly normal. They'll just be the normal pull and tug of family life. We know this goes on. It's perfectly normal for us to lose our rag sometimes, for the kids to, do our head in, and, all of those things, they do happen. But listening, if you hear something and it feels to you, I don't think that's quite right. You see, one of the things I've really learned over the years is to trust your gut instinct.
Yeah.
Because sometimes something will kick in and it'll be just like a little kick inside your gut. And you might think, oh, no, I'm
I imagine that, yeah.
But, every time that I have thought, and paid no attention, I've always regretted it, because, it's always clear then that there was a reason why your gut kicked you there. Or we've learned to forget our gut instinct in our busy, high communication, rush world. But your gut instinct was there right from primeval times. And it's what protected you and helped you to protect your families. So it's important to listen to what your gut instinct is telling you. So if you feel that perhaps in the homes near you, something isn't right, find a means of being able to perhaps knock on the door, just in a friendly kind of a way. Maybe if you got overripe bananas, and so you've baked some banana bread. You say, "Oh, I've just made. I've got all this excess of banana bread. I just wanted to leave some for you."
Yeah.
Just so,
Something for the children, or
yes,
it could be under any premise, really, couldn't it?
yes, exactly. Just some means that you can make a little bit of contact, and then, as that person opens the door, I know you're going to be 2 meters away from them, but really be alert about what you're observing. What do you see in, the pallor of someone's skin, particularly if you feel that this is the person who perhaps is suffering. Is there something a little bit, like that their eyes are not quite making contact? A little bit of something that causes the body to slightly shrink in. There will be things there that
maybe not opening the door fully,
yeah,
maybe kind of guarding what's going on behind the door.
yes,
It can be quite subtle, can't it?
yes,
But actually, if you're looking out for it.
yes, that's exactly right, Jill. They may even not accept, if you've brought a little gift, or they may not accept.
Yeah. Because they might not be allowed to.
Might not be allowed to. So just don't go with any kind of an expectation. Just do it with an awareness of, I need to be alert here.
Yeah.
Now, if you feel that it's a cause for concern in terms of you think that person might be in danger, my advice would be to just let the police know.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean that they have to take action straight away. There's something that I often advise people that I work with. I know they don't want action taken because perhaps they feel that might, compromise them. I say, but go to the police station and get it logged.
Yeah.
So they've got the record. Then if they need to take action, there's not a whole lot of explanation that needs to happen, but they've got facts there. Now,
read today, Ruth, that in Northern Ireland, the police are actually, with a matter of course, they are visiting homes where incidences have been reported.
That's
so
brilliant.
Perpetrators know you're being kept an eye on, actually.
Exactly, because often, we know the bully, they're flagging up they've got issues. It's a cowardly, emotionally immature behaviour. And
what stops these bullies from actually going down this kind of route towards ultimately potentially killing their partners is the fact that they've always got somebody watching them from the outside. They've got people that they're having to put on a face for.
Yes.
And of course, that's the danger at the moment, is that nobody's watching them. They're in their homes. Yes. Women or men are isolated. Potentially nobody's seeing, and that's why this campaign is so important.
Yeah.
Is that actually they need to know that somebody is watching them.
Yes. And so, each one of us can play our part and help the police here, because now they're on the front line of this.
Yeah.
So, if you feel that there is a problem and you think that, this person will not be in any kind of a situation to be able to access support for themselves, then just go down to the police station and say, look, this may be nothing, but I am concerned and I just want to log this with you. So they've got the address, maybe the name of those neighbours as well. This isn't tittle-tattling, it's not being a grass. It's just making sure that the information that may serve to really support somebody who is in that abusive situation may serve to possibly even save their life. That's how extreme it can get.
It can be, yeah. And I would rather, if somebody was concerned about people going out twice a day because you're only supposed to go out twice a day, in that circumstance, I would like to say to people, just mind your own business, because all you've got to do is look after yourself. This is the exception to the rule. Yes. This is the moment where I don't want you to mind your own business.
Yes.
And don't leave it to somebody else thinking that it's somebody else will report that.
Yes.
Actually, it doesn't matter if 10 people report it.
Yes.
You go and do your bit.
Yes. And this is, how communities work, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is looking out for each other. And what I do love about the situation we're in is that we have become so much more community conscious. and so much more aware of how we can care for those in our community.
Yeah.
So we've been, because of the pandemic, we've been looking at those who are vulnerable to that, but we now are hyper aware that there are those who are vulnerable in a very different way that is directly caused by the
Yes.
lockdown situation.
In the same way that people will die of heart disease and cancer and
Yes.
strokes, domestic abuse is part of the whole picture.
Yes, you're absolutely
And
right.
there's a lot of work going on as well with kind of code words and stuff like that. So we've already talked about the 99955 thing. There's the campaign of, in pubs and clubs, if you feel you're under danger, you can go up to the bar and say, "Is Angela here?" So that's the Ask Angela campaign. Have you heard that one?
I have, but of course the problem is they're not open now, are they?
No, but I mean,
Yeah,
but there's also, I'm trying to kind of think of ways that we can use similar things, these code words. And I was reading somewhere that maybe, with somebody like this, is you could just let them know that if they really feel that they need help, maybe they could just send you a text and say, "Can you get me a bottle of milk?"
yes,
Something that
yes,
is very bland.
yes.
All you need, here's my phone number. If ever you need help, just ask me, or I need a pint of milk or whatever.
Yes,
And
yes,
I will know and I will get help for you.
yes, yes, yeah, anything like that. And the more widely known that such codes can be
Yeah.
made, will be a great help.
And we're hoping that, it's a lot of responsibility. We've already got huge amounts of responsibility for our postmen and women and our, people in supermarkets. But very often at the moment, the only people that these victims are seeing are those key workers. It's true,
Yes,
isn't it?
yes, it's true. Yes.
So actually, we really need them to be hyper vigilant too, because there may well be the woman, and the only thing that she does in a week is go shopping, and that's that desperate look in her eyes. And if she slips you a note to say, "Please help me," it really does need to be taken very seriously.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, yes.
And the other
I
thing
think,
you said about listening
yeah.
is that, isn't there a lot to be said about silence as well? So what I mean is, there might be noise going around for abuse, but actually, if you're, and you referred to this already, was that a lot of the signs and symptoms of this is that people become very withdrawn. And
Yes.
so, is it a case that there may be people in your circle who during this time have become even more withdrawn and silent, and that's the thing that is a red flag too, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, definitely. I mean, in terms of listening within your own home, if we were saying that it can be quite normal to hear shouting and people losing their rag a bit, but if it sounds to you like there's only the one person that's losing their rag, and it's followed by silence,
Yeah.
and that could well be a red flag signal. And the other thing that you will notice, and again, it may be trickier to notice this now, but thinking about people that you see that perhaps you don't know, because with this becoming very withdrawn as a result of being in an abusive relationship. Now, you may not be that person when you're with friends and people with whom you feel comfortable, but you will notice, as a stark contrast, when that person is with the abusive partner, they become very different. And it's like a shutdown. So you will see their eyes will be lower. You will notice, if you notice carefully, their body will be slightly tense. I don't know whether you can see the slight difference.
Yes, I can, yeah.
In the way I'm holding myself right now. And they won't be looking at the other person. There won't be like a conversation going on. If any words are spoken, their eyes will still stay down, and it will be like they have emotionally shut off.
Yes.
And the key thing here also is that you will see the same thing happen if a child is with an abusive parent. Not necessarily that the parent is being abusive to that child, but if that child has experienced the unwitnessed abuse within the home, if they sense that the parent is becoming tense and that, anger's starting to build up, and you'll see everyone else around will feel it, and they'll be almost wanting to pull away from that person, and you'll see the child will have it emotionally shut off. It's like a shutdown happens.
Yeah.
So that's a key thing to look out for. Less likely that we will see it right at this point in time, but you may do. You may, see if there's a family visiting the supermarket or something like that.
Well, I'm thinking about, things like FaceTime and Zoom. We're having much more. I mean, a lot of us are speaking more often
Yes.
to our close ones because we've got more time. And like you've just illustrated beautifully there, is that I don't need to be physically in the room with you to understand those emotions that you've just portrayed.
Yeah.
And so it will be visible if you have a Zoom call, for example, a family Zoom call. That kind of reaction will be very, very visible. And also, even, at this time, if people aren't responding to you, if you're trying to get a hold of them, because that's really unusual at the moment, because most people are looking to reach out. So if somebody's not reaching out, then that's something to be really concerned about. Would you agree?
Very much so, Jill. That is a really good point. And also, if you do manage to get hold of them and you're on a call with them, do they seem to be perhaps speaking a bit quietly?
Yeah.
Are their eyes sometimes darting elsewhere? And even if they are able to speak with you normally, do you see in their eyes, like, that they're not actually making contact, the eyes are just kind of constantly moving? Because those, again, are the signs that somebody is under stress of some kind.
Yeah.
And it may be that the stress is because there's somebody in the household who is behaving abusively or in a controlling way towards them.
Yeah.
So what we can do is really heighten our awareness of the signals that we give out. In communication, only 7% of communication is actually the words that we speak. So, that's a massive amount that comes through in our tonality and in our body language.
Yeah.
And we, right from prehistoric times, that's how we were communicating with each other. From when we didn't have words, we knew we were able to communicate. And, babies can understand, and we can understand babies through that whole body language. So we've got a lot that we can use to be alert and question anything that kicks in, and that gut instinct says something's not right. Don't ignore that.
No.
See what you can do to gently investigate a little bit further.
Yes.
Don't push it, because that somebody might get too terrified and it could spark an even bigger problem. But
yes, it's a very dangerous time, and you're not necessarily going to go in there and suggest that the woman leaves, because that's not necessarily the right time, because that's often the most dangerous time for a woman.
Yes, exactly.
It's about being subtle, it's about being supportive and discreet and not being judgmental, but just letting them know you're there. And one final thing is that, what Refuge say, the domestic abuse charities say, is that victims are much more likely in the first instance to confide in somebody that is close to them. So is that you? Is that you? If that is you, then please be open and aware that it's your responsibility. Take on board that it's okay to be a bit nosy at this time in a very subtle way, and to help in whichever way you can.
And there's another little addition to that as well, Jill, because especially if it's someone close to you, you may have their contact number. So you may be able to send like a WhatsApp message or something like that. And if you feel that the message you get back in return is very short, doesn't give much information, again, just does that set off alarm bells for you? You
Is
know,
that
is
normal?
that in your experience not the way that person would normally? It's like, you know, they have to hurriedly send a message. I'm all right, thanks.
Delete it.
Yeah, you know, it's a little bit like that, because, you know, anyone that you do feel might be in a situation of danger, if you possibly can get a contact number, you know, a private contact number of theirs, again, you'd have to go about it in a subtle way if it's not somebody that you know that well.
Mm.
But yes, if it's somebody you know, you may have been uncomfortable and suspicious about your friend or your relation's partner, and you'll be even more aware now of looking out for these signs that
Yeah.
things are perhaps, as you were saying, Jill, they're declining quite rapidly, and or escalating perhaps is a
Yeah,
better way of
probably a better way. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly what you're
yeah,
saying. Yeah.
yeah,
Brilliant, Ruth. Well, thank you so much for all your wisdom and insights and honesty today. I am going to put links into wherever this is posted. So this goes out as a podcast, this will go out as a YouTube.
yeah.
I would really appeal to everybody to share this as much as possible, because you know, there are some lives that you could potentially save.
Yeah.
And if you do happen to see the Spot the Signs campaign posters, these are designed partly, some of them have gaps in them so that local services, because we've put national services and helplines on the posters, but I've also created one where local services could go, because we know that, you know, some of the national ones are really overwhelmed, but it also allows other specific cultures to put their helplines on, because, you know, some women will only go to people that there's a language barrier, let alone a cultural barrier for some people. So please do make sure that if you see these posters that you share them, and not just once. We know how Facebook works, bless it. You know, it likes just to you know, keep us all guessing, and not show very many people. So thank you, Ruth, and thank you for your generosity in providing the little voice recording as well. I'm sure that's going to help many people to just get through what is a very difficult time.
Absolutely. Starting to get back control of what's going on inside here will be a really big first step.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jill, for inviting me. I really appreciate it, and brilliant, the campaign that you're putting in place here.
Well, let's hope we can just make a difference in our very small ways, you and I.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.